Point Pelee and Pelee Island are the heart of their ancestral territory. Caldwell First Nation will exercise its responsibility to protect the air, waters, lands, and resources as it has from time immemorial. In many First Nation communities, there are stories and experiences among Indigenous people of hate and racism. Regardless if it was subtle or blatant, the darkness that is ever present from the days of first contact between our ancestors and the settlers to even as recent as 2023 has remained as an obstacle.
Carrie Ann Indigenous, Makanaktotum, Potawatomi Iroquois, Caldwell First Nation, and Dunjaba.
My name is John Daniel Stewart. I am Potawatomi, Chippewa. My dad calls me a potato chip. And I am a status member of Caldwell First Nation.
My name is Lonnie Dodge. I'm a proud Caldwell band member. I'm Potawatomi and Delaware. It's a nice mix.
Louise Hillier, Caldwell First Nation, and my background is I'm a worker. So I've been a general laborer, I've worked in the hospitality industry, I've worked at St. Clair College in various departments and positions, and then I've been here at Caldwell ever since.
What comes to mind when you hear the words hate or racism?
I would say the first thing that comes to mind would be fear. I think anger, and really I think those two coincide with just being different and not understanding that.
To hate you is more than unliking someone or something. To hate you can't even stand to be around them.
Oh my God, racism, hate, that's a very strong word. And when we were kids, when I was young, I experienced at firsthand was reverse racism at first. Because when I went to school, I went to a little one-room school where we had grade 1 to grade 8 all in the same room. And going there, there was no other natives. We were the only native family. So we never really, I was more proud of being native, but I hated being poor. So once the schools amalgamated, we got to go to Howard Harwich Moravian Town. So I entered there at grade 7. But there was other First Nations youth that I've never met before. And all of a sudden they would ask me, I was very proud always to be I would tell them, I'm Potawatomi. And the kids would tease me, but you don't have a home, you don't have a reserve. They actually were the full word. You don't have a reserve, and you're an apple. So, and that stuff at that time when I was young kind of hurt. And then I was even very sensitive then, a little different, and I was being gay, but I didn't know. So I was always doing other stuff. But then growing up as an adult, those kids talked to me like I was their best friend back in high school and public school. So even though it might have been reverse racism at the point, it really wasn't in the long run, because I experienced more racism as an adult now than I've experienced before. Right?
It's just like there's this icy hand that reaches up inside and just grabs your heart. And it's like you don't breathe. You just have to sort of hear what's coming next and decide what sort of protection you need to apply to yourself.
Tell us about a time you've heard, seen, or experienced hate or racism.
I would say definitely all through school. That was something that was not an everyday occurrence for myself. Being an Anishinaabe, just pretty much got beat up every day for that one. So
when I really experienced racism was in Toronto, and at that time I was drinking then, because when I was young, because I was not in the closet, I was gay, I was different, I was an alcoholic, I didn't know how to deal with emotions, and so I drank and I did drugs and dropped out of school. Well, what happened to me, my friend, I was drunk and he thought I was dying, so he dropped me off at the hospital. And while I was at the hospital, I passed out. And when I woke up, it was like somebody was touching me, so I just started swinging. It was a male nurse, right? And I started swinging. So they were going to charge me with assault, but it was just a reaction, so they didn't. So the police were called, the police came, and while I was leaving, they were out there and they told me I was lucky, blah, blah, blah. So, and they baited me, right? So once they baited me, I pulled a G.I. Jane and I turned around and I said those words. Well, they said, what did you say? And then they just tackled me and just beat me, pulled me. After they were done with that, then they took me downtown to the police station and to where there was no cameras. They did the same thing and stripped me naked, and then it physically abused me, and then mentally, verbiage that was undescribable what they were saying to me, and that's when it really, really hurt. I was locked up for the night. I went home. I called my doctor, family doctor, in the morning, and he came to my house and made a visit. I told him exactly what had happened to me. He looked at my clothing. He could see exactly everything that I said had happened to me. But then I did get a lawyer and go to court, and I was going to not fight the charge that I was drinking. I had been drinking and was sobered up, but for the police abuse. And I actually went to 2 or 3 sessions before the lawyer said, Lonnie, if you just touched one of them, you're going to jail. Do you want to do this? And I said no, because it was 3 words against me, right? So then we ended up dropping the charges.
I would say that my first experience was when I was in grade 2. So I was 7 years old, and to me that whole process, that almost full year of grade 2, my childhood innocence, as far as I'm concerned, was stolen. You are never the same after that, because up until that point, I never knew what it meant or felt like to be hated. I'd only known love. So this was totally foreign, unprovoked. The teacher she was a sadist, really. And by today's standards, she never would have been allowed to teach a primary class. But yeah, she constantly sent me down to the bathroom at least 4 days out of the 5 to wash my hands, because she would put her hand next to mine, and she was German descent, so she was very, very white. And as a child, I was much darker than I am now. And she would say, you need to go and wash your hands, they're dirty. And her excuse was, stay down there and wash them until they're as clean as mine. So I'd be down there, and the one teacher would always stop me and say, what are you doing in the hall? And I'd say, I'm going to the bathroom. Why? Miss Neufeld is sending me there to wash my hands. Why? Well, she said, they're dirty. Show me your hands. And I'd show her, and she'd say, there's nothing wrong with your hands. And I'd be like, I have to go to the bathroom because Miss Neufeld said I have to go and wash my hands. So off I'd go. And that continued for quite some time. We had always been taught, you respect your teachers. They've gone to school a long time to be able to teach you, you respect them. And I couldn't respect this woman, so I started playing hooky. And I went down to the beach, and I crawled underneath one of the cottages, and I stayed there until I figured it was time to go home. And then I went home, and I was in trouble, of course. But then I had to tell my dad why I wasn't going to school. So the next day, he and my mom took me to school. And they met with the principal, and then they met with the teacher, and he basically told them in no uncertain terms, she had to stop what she was doing. And she was trying to tell him that I was her pet. And my dad was not up for any of that, and he simply said, you calling my daughter a dog? An animal? And she was like, no, 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 she's just one of my pets. And he's like, she's nobody's pet. And he told her that he was in the war and that he had killed a lot of Germans that did nothing to him. And he said, if you think I'll have a problem killing you, I won't. He said, don't ever do this again to my daughter. And that was basically the end of it, because she tried to convince me that I was a liar at recess when the other children were gone. And after a few minutes, I was terrified, but I also had heard my father, what he said. And I said to her, if you don't let me go outside right now and leave me alone, when I go home, I'm telling my dad, get out of here. And so I was happy to go. But that was my first experience with hate and racism, and I wouldn't wish that on anyone.
What do you think causes hate or racism?
Deep belief in someone being better than someone due to the cultural background or their race or skin color or religion, and they try to oppress those that they don't see as fit.
Sometimes I believe that with the parents, what the children learn from their parents sometimes, right? And like I said, it's ignorance also, because they just don't know. Maybe the new people to the community or to the country, they don't see it as racism. They might experience racism at a different level than we do, but sometimes they don't, right? So
nobody wants it, but it happens anyway. And I think the greatest thing that we can do is teach our children not to engage in that sort of activity.
How can we move forward today for the sake of our future?
I don't know, that's a tough one. I think we've been talking about this for a really long time, and I feel I don't even know if it's gotten any better, right? But it's about educating, right, and understanding.
We need love, teaching, and learning. We need to be able to love one another, because love is the ultimate thing, and if we don't learn how to love each other, we're gonna go back to our old ways and continue on the generational trauma.
Most important for Caldwell First Nation, because we're a growing community and we get to build our community, we're land developers, and we actually teach our youth to be kind, to be open, to be honest, and trust them and listen to them, because children, like when I was growing up, I had no one to talk to. My mom was my father and my dad, but she couldn't do everything for work and support us. But what we have to do now with our children that are growing up now, we have to love them the way they are, teach them to be kind. We have to practice what we preach. We have to walk a mile in our shoes. How do they say that? We have to practice what we preach, but we also have to walk the walk, right? So if we're teaching about love, we actually have to, show love and demonstrate what love is.
What is a way you can connect with someone to help them understand who and what your views are?
Another good one, right? So I would think for that one, it's about sharing, and it's about people being able to listen, but it's also on my part to listen to how they're feeling as well. So there's definitely communication and education that needs to be done.
Speaking and listening to them. If you can talk to someone and see yourself in their shoes, it is the best way to connect with someone, but also having experiences and using others' as experiences to move forward.
Sometimes it's easy. Sometimes it's very easy. I'm a recipient of a liver transplant, and what I do is I talk sometimes from experience. So when I have to go to the hospital in London for like a checkup every couple of years or every year, I see the guys walking around with the little white binders, right? And the little white binders, I recognize when you're first out of transplant, you have to follow the rules, book word by word. And so sometimes just having my own experience with that will help me do it. So the same thing with racism. When that happens, I just try to practice what I preach, like I said, right?
Just chatting, because there's not much else I don't think that you can do about racism unless it's happening right there. You're there, it's happening, you have the opportunity to speak out against it, to stop it from happening. But if you say nothing and just stand there and observe, you're perpetuating racism to continue.
It is our hope that the stories and experiences shared here in this video can help bring understanding, awareness, and education to those who do not realize the kind of hate and racism that Indigenous people have gone through. In order to move forward and forge a new relationship between nations, we must let go of these negative views and work together.